Hey, thanks for stopping by the show. Man, have I got a special one for you guys today. Had an opportunity to sit down with Ted Rockwell from Everyday Companion. Everyday Companion is essentially a catalog of set lists from Panic shows since the early 90s. As a young man living in the Southeast, of course, I tried to catch Panic as I could. We even did a little bit of traveling to see them throughout the Southeast, but it was an excellent way in the era of the internet explosion for Panic fans to keep up with songs and shows. And Everyday Companion just did a really good job of cataloging set lists from all across the country and over in Europe when they played over there. Had a conversation with Sean Mills from Machine Funk, and Sean shared how he used to use Everyday Companion for guitar tablature when he was learning how to play guitar. Everyday Companion was very special to me and touched a lot of lives in an era where the internet was just getting started. People were really following the meteoric rise of widespread panic, and Everyday Companion played a critical part in keeping people abreast with the music that was being played and song stats and sit-in notes, and it just a fantastic tool. I still use it to this day, whenever I want to look back at stuff in time or keep track of what's going on now. Ted was very gracious to give me a lot of his time yesterday. I know he's very busy professionally and with his family. So thank you, Ted, for giving me a bit of time yesterday. I should not be surprised at how kind the man was. And he was very open about his journey with widespread panic. So I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed having the conversation. Let's go. Ted Rockwell, I am so glad you're here. I've got two beefs I need to resolve with you. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. First beef
Yeah.
is
Bring them on.
earlier today I went to my local chapter of the guys that want to grow beards that can't, and I'm a little upset that you have such a magnificent beard. I'm a little disappointed.
Okay. Yeah, I have good facial hair. I've had a beard. Here's something that most people don't know. I've had a beard since the fall of 1988. I have not had anything but a beard on my face for going on, I don't even know how many, what's the math on that, over 30 years.
The second thing, I first traveled out to Red Rocks. I think it was either 97 or 98.
Okay.
We did end up going up to Boulder. Since then, I've actually worked for a company that was based out of Boulder, and man, there's just something about that city right there at the base of the Flatirons that just I couldn't afford to live there. I'm sure just like the rest of the country, real estate has got to be out of hand, but. Man, what a beautiful place, and I'm a little bit jealous. You're not from Colorado originally, though, right?
No, I'm not. I've lived here. My family and I have lived here since we moved here at the end of 1997, 98. We were here just at the very beginning in January of 1998. I was born outside of Chicago
Oh,
originally. My parents are both from the Chicagoland area. And when I was 11, we moved to Alaska. And I lived in Alaska through high school, and then moved back to Chicagoland, into the city of Chicago, to go to DePaul University. And that's where I got my undergrad and graduate degree. My parents has only just recently moved back to the lower 48 from Alaska. And so I've spent quite a bit of time up there as well. But in 98, after, I got married in 94 to my college sweetheart, Lisa. We had published the first couple of Everyday Companions, and we decided to make a change and try to get out of the city, which was expensive and hard and just all sorts of things, and moved out to Colorado in 98.
how did you develop your love for music? Were your folks into music, or was it something you kind of picked up in college like I did, or?
Yeah, so I've got a very long history with music. My mom and dad are both big music fans. My mom's a folkie and was really into folk music, but she was also a big Beatles fan. My dad also was into like kind of, now we would call it like progressive rock, but he had Zappa albums and he was into the Grateful Dead and Jethro
Nice.
Tull. And so all of that stuff is a soundtrack of my life. In fact, there's an album, the Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles, that they didn't originally, when they did the CD re-releases, it wasn't on that list, or at least by the time it had gone on sale, I didn't have one of those CDs. And then later on in life, in my 30s, vinyl was coming back, and I found a copy of the Magical Mystery Tour, and I put it on the turntable, and it was the first time I'd heard it since I was a little kid. And I had this crazy epiphany of, oh my God, like this is one of my earliest memories that music has affected, was the Magical Mystery Tour, and how scary an album it was and how intense an album it was.
Mhm.
And so I have a long history of music, in terms of appreciation of music and having my ears open to a lot of different things. In college, I worked for a friend of mine, a college friend of mine, who had been doing music booking at Shuba's in Chicago. And then he opened a venue called Martyrs on Lincoln Avenue in Chicago. It's still there. They still book music, all the, 5-7 nights a week. And I would do artist relations, and I would work the door and all sorts of stuff. This is on top of going to school full time and
Mhm.
working full time. I had to work full time to go to
Me
school. I
too. Yeah.
worked at DePaul University in their print shop to go to school. And I got my undergraduate and my graduate degree that way. And then at night, I would go to Martyrs and work the door for cash. And so with that, I had my ears open to a lot of other stuff on top of what was already happening, which was I was a huge Grateful Dead fan. I was a huge jam band fan. I was, kind of picking up on where the culture was in terms of, where rock was, sort of migrating and changing. And Martyrs brought to me all sorts of other stuff. They would have like an Irish night. They would have African music come through, a variety of different influences that really helped me kind of, I don't know, understand that music isn't necessarily about, at least for me, music isn't about listening to a specific band or something. It's really about having your ears open and trying to connect with where the vibe is, where the musicians are really trying to express themselves.
Yeah, it's and actually caught my attention with that story because I had my first child when I was really young, my first marriage, which was I had my first daughter in 95, and that, I was 21 years old, and that didn't end up working out. I moved back to Athens, but I had to put myself through school too, and it's, God, I'm giving you virtual high fives because that is really hard to do. Go to school and work, and then work at night at a bar.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah, it was tough. My master's degree is in English literature, and talk about something that's intense even without a full-time job. There lots of reading, lots of writing, and so my undergrad was in marketing and communications. My graduate degree is in English lit, and I'll frequently meet someone, and they'll say, "Well, it sounds like you did that backwards." I've had a couple of people say that to me over the years. And I've really come to understand that I didn't do it backwards. Marketing and communications is changing, has changed, continues to change. It changes by the month, it changes by the minute practically these days. But the skills that I learned in getting my graduate degree in English Lit, that's something that I continue to rely on. The ability to read something, be able to process it and parse it and communicate it quickly, to be able to then think about it critically and be able to compare it to other things so that it's both understandable for myself, but then also understandable for other people. That's a skill that I'll take with me forever, whether or not I'm teaching English Lit or I'm processing, the differences between, a couple of different like old texts or something like that. I use that skill every single day.
That's super cool. I had my stepdad who pretty much raised me from 1980, 81 on up, was a Deadhead, and he still works in the screen printing business doing shirts and stuff, but he was one of the original folks in Athens that was doing tie-dyes, and I remember going to DC to see the Grateful Dead in 85, and then I was telling another guy that I spoke with a couple of weeks ago that I went and saw them at the Fox in 86, I believe it was. So, and that was kind of like my first taste of, quote unquote jam band improvisational stuff. And yeah, and it was kind of the segue to Panic, which we'll get into in a little bit, but tying Red Rocks and the Grateful Dead together, last week, obviously we lost Bill Walton, who was a huge Grateful Dead fan. But and you may already know this, but I did not know this story, and it made me laugh out loud. He tells the story about going to see the Dead years ago out at Red Rocks.
So we're on tour with the Dead, and we're up at Red Rocks. And I think it was in the 80s. I'm not sure. Somebody will know. Red Rocks, fantastic. 3 days, 3 nights in a row. Everybody's there. Camping, parties, hotels. Let's go. Just having the time of our lives. Show starts first night. Bam! The heavens explode. Thunder, lightning, just torrential, historic, epic, monumental rain, right? Just pounding all night long. But the fans, they all just stayed. Not a one left, and it was the Grateful Dead, and it was just better than perfect. And what we lived for, it was our team, it was our guys, it was our leaders, it was our beacons, and let's go to the promised land and let's celebrate. And so, but it just rained, just floods, water, rivers coming right down through the Red Rocks Amphitheater Bowl there. This phenomenal place. And so the concert's over and everybody goes back and they're looking at the weather report and talking to the guys and the police and everything. And they just said, look, this rain's going to keep going for the next 3 days. And so at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the band makes the decision, look, let's cancel Red Rocks and move the whole show downtown to McNichols Arena, which was the NBA arena at the time. And so everybody in the middle of the night gets up, drives back out to Red Rocks, works all night through the dawn, tearing everything. Grateful Dead, that's a big production. Mm-hmm. That's a big show. And tons of equipment, tons of lighting, everything. Work all day, tear it down, drive it down into town, set it up at McNichols, and at the announced starting time, they were ready. Mm-hmm. And they come out on the and it just, but everybody's beat, everybody's dead tired, and all the deadheads, we're all still wet from the night before, but the music starts up, and the joy and the happiness and the rainbows and the people and the smiles and the love and the spinners and just everything is just fantastic, right? So I'm just cruising through the whole arena, just listening to the music play and riding the wave and just having the time of my life as they're just going through, again, ricocheting off the comets and the stars and the planets and the universe, whichever one we're in that night. And I come around this corner, and there's this guy. Looks a lot like you, Big Cat. And he's walking right toward me. He's got these dazed, glazed eyes, and he's just like fierce and he's intense. Right. And I can just feel it. I can see
sweaty,
it.
Sweaty.
And it's sweaty. Strong, and I look at him, powerful, handsome. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I look at him, and he has got this shirt on. And I stop. We come face to face. So we stop, and I look at him, and I said, that is the coolest shirt I've ever seen in my life. This was like an airbrushed history of the world through the prism of the Grateful Dead, wow. Right? With pyramids and exploding bus stops, rainbows, serpents coming out, and it was just as wild a shirt as you could possibly imagine. I said, that's the coolest shirt I've ever seen. I had no idea who he was. He just looks at me, doesn't say a word, and rips off his shirt and gives it to me. Wow. And then he just goes on his way,
was
riding
he also
another
7
wave.
feet tall?
Did it fit? No. He was like a little short guy like Big Cat here. And so the night goes on, and I put the shirt on, right? And I'm wearing the shirt. And so and it was a fantastic shirt. People were talking all night long about my shirt. And the show's over. And so now we're all leaving. We're down the stage, out the back door, and through the gauntlet, all the fans reaching and grabbing and trying to get all the autographs and take the pictures, and the vans are waiting right there, and we're getting in the vans. And I look over, and there's that guy who gave me the shirt. And he's standing on the front of the rail, reaching in, looking, still with no shirt on.
Yes.
And I look at him, and I said, you're coming with us. And so I picked him up by the back of the neck and lifted him up over the barrier, threw him in the van and says, let's go. We got back to the hotel. I introduced him to everybody all around. They looked at my shirt and said, oh my God, that's the coolest shirt ever, Bill. And they hired him on the spot. That was Dick Lotvilla, and he went on to become the curator of the vault.
Wow. That's amazing.
Wow. You never know.
So people who don't know, Dick, he basically was the librarian for all of Grateful Dead's music.
And his job was to sit in the vault all day long and listen to all the old concerts and decide which ones were good enough to put out picks as re-releases.
Right.
Sometimes the universe just kind of works together like that, doesn't it?
That's the way all of our universe works. We just have to keep our eyes open. And we just have to keep our shoulders back and our heads up.
Just a fantastic story, and Bill Walton's energy was really great to see and kind of helping the Dead community, expose that music to other people that might not have known it otherwise. But.
Yeah, for sure. I had the really good fortune of meeting him twice, not necessarily at any great length or anything like that, but he would be out here for CU Buffs games, and I happened to with basketball games, commentating on behalf of I think the Pac-12 network or something like that. And I got to meet him very briefly before one of those, and just kind of gave him a high five. But then I also later on, the Dead & Co thing would happen here at Folsom Field, and there was just no missing this guy. He's in the middle of the floor, and had a really magical day where a friend of mine came to town, and shout out to Jamie if you're listening to this. Her mom ended up with extra tickets on the floor, and I didn't realize they weren't just floor tickets; they were like VIP tickets, and so we were way close, like so close that every time the camera that was dedicated to John Mayer would pop up, I was in the middle of the frame with John Mayer on the big screen, right? And so I ended up getting to walk over and say hello and just tell him how much I appreciated kind of the work that he does and how he's bringing kind of people a message from the Grateful Dead land that maybe they wouldn't otherwise hear, because he has this accessibility through sport that is abnormal. Like, it's not a normal thing to have somebody advocate on behalf of like the gospel of Jerry Garcia pretty much every time he took a microphone.
Was he just a sweetheart to you, I imagine?
Yes, and it's funny because he kind of wouldn't let me go. I was ready to get out of the conversation.
Right.
I was kind of moving on to do other things, and he kept on. He kept talking to me, and I was just like, Bill, I got to go to the bathroom and get a beer. Like, I really got to go. He's a great guy. He really was.
I wanted to talk to you because a number of years ago, I went to go see Panic in Alpharetta down here in Georgia, and I had this. We were up on the lawn. I had this epiphany. I was talking to this young kid who was by himself. He just happened to be up there standing next to us. And it was the first time I realized that there's an entire population of people that follow Widespread Panic that didn't have the fortune of knowing who Michael Hauser was. So it was important for me to talk to you because you knew about Panic way before I did. I knew what Everyday Companion was, the online portal, and that was for us as a fan base, and for people that were sucked into the music and were, like to talk jive about, oh man, they sandwiched this and that with this and that last night, and you'd run and go see. And what was the impetus behind you creating Everyday Companion? Can you share that story?
Yeah, for sure.
That's a little broad question, but
it is. But it's there wasn't anything going on with the Panic online much back when I first started getting into this, because it was kind of the internet really hadn't taken off yet. I saw my first show in '92, and as I was talking about, I was in a master's degree program, and I finished that up in 94, 95, is that right? No, in 95, 96. And as I turned that corner, I'd met the band, essentially. So let me back up. So in order to understand the story, you need to understand how I came by knowing Widespread Panic.
Awesome.
A friend of mine, Adam Sukarski, from Telluride, came back from Telluride. He's a college friend of mine. Came back to Chicago from Telluride. And he's like, oh my God, you got it. This band, and the next time they come through town, we got to check them out. And it was Widespread Panic. And so I bought landslide version of Space Wrangler in the dollar cutout bin at Rose Records. Started listening to them. I'm like, yeah, they seem like a pretty cool band. And then got to see them for the first time. The next time they came through town, or maybe it was it was May of '93. I had the good fortune of going to a barbecue that Adam and a couple of friends were throwing. They had taken members of Blues Traveler and most of Widespread Panic to a Cubs game.
Oh, wow. And
we're having a barbecue. And so at that barbecue, I got to meet Dave. I got to meet Sonny. I got to meet Mike. I got to meet Billy Sheeran from Blues Traveler. Todd was there. And I exchanged email addresses with Dave Schools. At the time, this is, early '93.
Yeah.
Nobody had an email address. Nobody had an email address. I did. And so we struck up a conversation via email. And back in those days, I was an English lit major, so keep that in mind. This was more like a pen pal relationship than it was like what we would call emailing one another today. I'd write long letters and he'd write letters back. And so fast forward a few years, and I'm finishing up my master's degree, And I'm realizing, as I described, I had to work really hard to get through college, and I'm working full time, and I'm, researching. And my wife and I got married in '94, and she basically says, we got married, and then I said goodbye to you for 2 years, because she never saw me. I was just always working or always in school. I said, I said to myself, I'm like, I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands, and I better do something with this, because otherwise I'll go on to something else, and I won't have that time anymore. I'm used to doing research. I'm used to putting my head down and writing things. So I contacted Dave, and I was like, hey, I noticed that you guys don't have really anything going on in the space of like doing a dead base for Widespread Panic. Mm-hmm. And there's also no like web presence. Like you guys don't have any internet or anything, no web pages. He's like, yeah, you should go ahead and do that. And he started connecting me to people. He connected me to Horace Moore, who eventually became the archivist for their live recordings, and Gary Vereen, who was their equipment manager, and a whole assortment of people,
Larry Aquaviva,
like Athens folks. Larry Aquaviva. Yep. Larry actually came to me through another guy.
Oh, okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that whole no, you don't need to. I mean, that's a whole nother story. But in any case, that's how the origin of it happened. Was that I ended up kind of thinking that maybe there was something there, and the ground beneath me started moving, but I didn't really know what to do with it. I'm not a database engineer, and honestly, I didn't really know how to build a website or anything. So I reached out to Ben Tannen, who is the founder of SpreadNet, which was a big online BDS board for spread heads for Widespread Panic fans. And he put me in touch. He's like, well, there's this guy, Will Duckworth, who's been putting together databases and stuff. And he may be a good one to talk to. So Will and I struck up a conversation and basically started a business without meeting one another, and started this project without meeting one another. And that's eventually what became the Everyday Companion. Back in the day, it was called Panic Web, and panicweb.org was the very first incarnation of anything related to what we'd call Everyday Companion today. Mm-hmm. That became Everyday Companion in like late 95 and into 96, and then we published the first book in late 1996.
Which brings me to a great question I had. I never knew that there was a ink and paper iteration of Everyday Companion. So when I started looking up, just a little info on you and kind of the history, I did not realize that. And tell me what that consisted of, the book itself.
Yeah. So we published 3 editions and then a smaller version called the Touring Companion. That one came out in '99. Mm-hmm. The book essentially is it's really modeled after the Dead Base. I mean, we have to give props where they're due. I was following what Dead Base had kind of put out there already, and we had pretty much every set list that we could figure out. This is the days before the internet were really taking over things. So we were comparing tapes and people's written set lists, and I mean, I literally had all of Gary Vereen's notebooks at one point, all the ones that are accounted for. There's a couple notebooks actually missing out there somewhere in the wild. And just comparing what he had written down to what we had written down from tapes, or people had written down just from memory or whatever it was. And so the books had all the set lists. We also had an every time played section, which basically maps out each song and all the times it was played, what song was played before that, what song was played 2 before that, after that, 2 after that, a whole bunch of stats on a variety of different things, fan stories about people going to shows, people talking about their favorite songs, a whole slew of stuff in there. We published 3 books up until 2000. Uh-huh. And it got to be a fairly big production and really expensive. Yeah. And a big, and this is before you could hire a company that would basically just do everything, a drop ship kind of situation. And we just put it on a hiatus because it's a lot. Now you fast forward, and we did a little math the other day on like, should we try to publish another book? And just the set lists alone would end up being this like 400-page volume or something. It's just enormous. Wow. We've talked a little bit about potentially, at some point publishing 2 books, the Mikey era and then the Jimmy era, or the George and Jimmy era, to be able to break that up and kind of give people what they would want. They could purchase a book with just set lists in it or something like that, or something that would be more expansive than that, a multi-volume set,
Yeah.
But it's a big production, and there's a lot associated with having to do something like that. And really, at the end of the day, what you get online, the everydaycompanion.com, is what we've always intended that project to be. There's no advertising there.
Right.
We are not selling space to the highest bidder. It is a fan-run project for fans by fans. And a lot of that means that, the fans actually own that data too, right? We've never made any money on this project. We've never set out to make any money on this project. And at the end of the day, that information is really for the fan and the band to be able to use as they would see fit.
And everydaycompanion.com might have the coolest legal disclaimer ever, which this site is not affiliated with or endorsed by Widespread Panic, Sanctuary Records, or Brown Cap, but we think they are a nifty bunch of folks anyway. Well, I used to tear up, and sorry, I haven't soundproofed this room yet. I just moved into a new house, so if you get a little echo, I apologize. I used to use the Every Time Played hyperlink in this site a lot. What's the logic behind that query? Like, is it all automated? How do you build that logic behind if you don't mind me nerding out for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole thing is, this site is frighteningly Web 1.0. So this is all run by an Access database. So technically, the database itself is not online. There is a physical laptop that is maintained. The data is maintained by my good friend Scott Holcomb. Mm-hmm. Scott has been doing this project on a temporary volunteer basis since 2000. For 24 years, he is temporarily. He is absolutely the heart and soul of this project, because he's able to make sure that the data is actually maintained. What happens is he updates the Access database, and we have a custom interface for that kicks out let's say a new show has been played. He enters the songs for for that show, and then he kind of kicks out the Access database kicks out a bunch of pages, essentially a bunch of code that he then uploads to the site, and it updates the certain pages that need to be updated. So let's say on the Every Time Played page, they play a brand new song, mm-hmm. or a cover that they've never played before. That page becomes one of the things that gets kicked out in that export, and is then imported onto, or sent to the server that everyone gets to see on the World Wide Web.
Very cool. So you're in. I'm just piecing it together in my mind. So you've moved to Colorado. You've started Everyday Companion right before mm-hmm. the infamous. Was it 96 when the sit and ski runs were happening? So you're
96.
Yeah, so you're in the throes of like this meteoric rise of Widespread Panic. I bet that had to been super cool to be out there during that time. Not that I don't know. I guess I always associated Red Rocks and like that whole. I don't know how to explain it, but I think in my mind, going back to my state of mind back then, that was like the place to be, Colorado. Like everything was legal. Everybody's having fun, and you're in the throes of it. You've just started this awesome tool for the rest of us.
Yeah, well, you have the timing slightly off, but that's yes. We'd gotten out of here in '98, so we were still in Chicago in like 95, 96, 94, 95, 96, 97. I'll tell you, you may think of Colorado. Yes, I had the same thing. Being from the Midwest, I was thinking Colorado was like, man, that is the headiest place. Mm-hmm. I need to get out there as soon as I possibly can, kind of thing. But being in the Midwest really afforded us, I think, more amazing opportunities. because there were so many shows within just a few hours drive, it felt like. And so in 97 in particular, we were at the height of working on the Everyday Companion, really trying to figure out like what we were going to do with the project. And so I was traveling as often as possible to go see the band. And I saw, I think, roughly a third of the shows they played in 1997. I flew to 2 different destinations, but the rest of the time I was able to get in the car and get to the destination I was looking for. Now, in 96, they did perform their first show at Red Rocks as a headliner, May 31st, 1996. We came out for that. I was super jealous of the Sit and Ski tour. I couldn't do it because I was just finishing up my master's degree, but I hooked up a whole bunch of my friends with the phone numbers for the venues and the on sale dates. So I had a whole ton of friends who got to go and I didn't get to go. And so I was in touch with schools and I'm like, man, I really want to go see something. Like, what's coming up? He's like, well, no one knows this yet, but Red Rocks is coming up. And so we bought tickets on the day tickets went on sale, and we came out to Red Rocks from Chicago and ended up having an epic time. I'm in love with that show. Over time, it has become one of my absolute favorites to remember and listen to. And one of the reasons is because it's the foundation of Widespread Panic's run at Red Rocks. It's also, in my opinion, one of the reasons that Red Rocks continued to be and then even expanded its influence as a venue in this country. Every year, Widespread Panic would come to town and would automatically, on the first day, within the first 15 minutes, sell out 3 shows. And the venue and the promoters and everyone involved knew that they had that as an anchor every year, and they could build a schedule around that. And I think that it had a lot of influence on the growth of the popularity of Red Rocks, is knowing that they had that for sure sellout weekend every single year.
And people will never really know the struggle or the anticipation that you felt, because back in the day you had to send an envelope with a money order or whatever to Brown Cat, and then wait to see if your name got drawn. And that was kind of fun. Like I wish they, more bands would do that now, just with all the bots and stuff that exist out there. But it was really neat to, all your friends would be like, "Yep, got my stuff in the mail. Wait and see what happens."
My wife and I, mostly my wife, were always the ones to help our friends figure that out, because no one really could follow the rules properly. The whole origin of that was the Grateful Dead, right? And, people would get their GDTS, Grateful Dead ticket sales mailers out there, and many people would have them returned because they did not follow the instructions exactly as indicated. We were pros at that. Every year GDTS would happen, and every year we would be able to pull tickets. And so we were frequently the ones like organizing people. Again, this is before the internet. This is before you could just look it up on a web page. You'd be like, how the hell are we gonna do this? I don't know, call the Rockwells. They're gonna know the instructions,
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when I was in Athens doing the college thing, this will age me a bit. Todd came into Circus City where I worked. I didn't help him, but I was kind of watching from afar. He was interested in buying a web TV, and that is aging myself a little bit, but it was basically for the younger kids out there. It was like this little box that looked kind of like a little VCR, and you would hook it to your TV, and you'd plug the other part into the modem, and it was this very slow thing. But at the time, it was pretty earth-shattering, because it was like this little device. You didn't have to have a computer, and you could browse pages, and it was pretty slow. But anyway, and then the Sandbox, you had to use Sandbox if you wanted to do tape trading. That was cool. That kind of expanded, horizons a bit. But I know I bounced around a bit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, talking about tape trading. I was a huge tape guy, and I still have quite a few of my tapes. I did a lot of trading, but I also had the good fortune of knowing a few tapers, and so that afforded me the possibility of like, okay, I got the show from last night, and I can trade it for other stuff. It was really, really fortunate being a part of this project, the Everyday Companion, and being in touch with Dave and being in touch with Horace Moore back in the early day, because in 97, 97 by many people's estimation is one of the best years they ever had. And they were playing so well, and the set lists were just so solid, and every show just seems to be amazing. And they'd figured their sound out. Their soundboards were really, really good. And I want to say it was like between the summer and fall tour of 97, I get a holler from Horace, and he's like, Dave says that you should listen to a bunch of these shows. They're planning on putting out a live album. So send me a bunch of DATs. So I went out and, I mail ordered like 50 DATs or whatever, and had them literally just shipped directly to Horace. And he, created a copy of all these things and then sent them to me. And I got in touch with Dave during this period while I was waiting for them to come to me. And I'm like, okay, so you want me to listen to this stuff, but then what? Can I trade these? He's like, absolutely. You can totally trade them with people. And so all of those 97 soundboards, that's the origin of how those got out into the wild so quickly. We had soundboards of all, so much from 97 by the time Fall Tour started. And that was really unusual. Basically what happened is I got them, I dubbed a copy of the 50 tapes or 60 tapes or whatever it was, and then forwarded them along to a friend of mine who made 2 copies of them. And then he forwarded those 2 copies around. And so within a couple of weeks, we had all of those tapes copied and coast to coast. We had folks on the West Coast, we had people in the Southeast, we had people in the Northeast.
That Warfield 97 is still one of my favorite shows of all time. It was dirty.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to Wilker about this, and he brought up a good point that he said, the longevity of bands that allow tapers, like the Grateful Dead, like their ability to attract an audience and sustain over time. There's no arguing with that. And he, pointed out that the record label got a little bit weird on taping for a little bit, but I'm pretty certain that Dave was the impetus behind kind of squashing that, because him being a Dead fan, he knew what organically that was how the band was going to spread. Not being on the radio a whole lot.
I believe that he was taping too. I think that he was helping tape if he wasn't actually running the deck. And there's that part of that kind of ethic of, understanding where the fan is, why someone's a fan, right? That's something that he brings to this that I think is maybe underappreciated. I mean, he really understands being because he's a fan. Like, he's a fan of other bands. It's one of the reasons he's such a great producer. He listens to these bands, and he becomes a fan of what they're trying to do, and he helps them try to realize what they're doing from the sensibility of someone who would appreciate listening to it. And I think that's one of the things that really attracted me to talking to him is his real compassion for, and understanding for what it means to be a fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And a very intelligent man. Like, you see him on stage, he's playing music a lot, but he's very articulate and very, very wise.
He's a great writer. For a while he had a blog, and he was publishing, missives from the road kind of blog postings. And
oh yeah, that's right.
I just love that. And I've really, in any time he gets a chance to write every so often, I think he wrote like a piece for the Neil Casal book that came out. And anytime you see something that he has written, it's great. He has a really great voice. It's very articulate. He's a former journalism student. So, if he hadn't, picked up bass and started in a rock and roll band, he'd probably be writing exposés for Esquire or something. Yeah.
Well, I know I got a little nervous just talking to you. I've been anticipating this conversation all day. So I didn't want to pass over the opportunity to retell the story. Going back to what you said about the first copy of the printed Everyday Companion, you wrote a really good article on Medium that was in that was a very good summation of the feelings of Michael Hauser and kind of what he meant to all of us. Could you go back? Would you mind telling that story briefly about when you guys went to the Barrymore to present the band with that first editor's copy?
It'd be my pleasure.
Okay.
So we've been working on this project for a while, and again, being fans, you don't know. Like being a fan of a band, it's a weird situation sometimes. Am I being too obsessive?
Mm-hmm.
Are we doing things that would we want to be respectful, at the same time we want to show our appreciation. And so we had this project, and we didn't know how it was going to be received exactly. Dave was being very encouraging, but that's one thing. It's a whole nother thing to have like cast and crew. You have the band and crew, fully visible on this. And so to ensure that we had a product that the organization wasn't going to puke on, they weren't going to be like, you guys really shouldn't be doing this.
Get the fuck out of here.
We produced a bunch. Yeah, exactly. We produced a bunch of advanced copies, editor's copies. And the whole point was we produced, I think, 20 of them. And we sent them out to various folks so that they could read through them and provide any edits that they could see, typos, that kind of thing. And I produced some for the band, and we numbered them 1 through 6. And at the we happened to drive up, we're like, we're going to see them at the Barrymore. And we drove up, and, I announced that to Dave. I'm like, we're going to be there for these shows. And he's like, well, come back and see us after. And we go back with these, editor's copies books, and I'm able to kind of hand them out to each one of the guys, except Hauser. He was somewhere. I don't know where he was. Each one of them was really appreciative. Dave was sitting there with, I think it was Mindy Watkins on a couch, and we were talking a little bit, shooting the breeze. And Dave, David kind of had a bit of a preview of what was going on anyway. So he was sort of flipping through it, but we were having more of a conversation than anything else. And as I'm standing there, I hear a voice behind me, and it's like, hey, do you have one for me? And I turn around, it's Hauser. I'm like, well, of course. And I go into my bag and I hand it to him. And I'm thinking to myself, it's kind of along the lines of handing it to the rest of the band members. They each got theirs and like, oh, this is really cool. But they kind of went off and did their own thing. He sat down immediately. Like, I'm not kidding. He grabbed the book from me and like sat down exactly where he'd been standing and started flipping through this book and started like seeing shows that he remembered. Like he found the show that he believes that his mom and dad had first come to see the band. And he pointed that out. And then he flipped through again and like, ooh, I remember this one. Do you remember this one, Dave? You remember the fire marshal with this one? Or, that kind of stuff was going on. And he's kind of like, for a minute, I think he's like talking to himself. But then I realized that he's like, he's basically talking to me. He's talking to me and Lisa. He's telling us about these memories. And it really meant a lot.
Yeah.
It still does. It means a lot to have someone appreciate your appreciation of their work in that kind of way. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, I'm sort of getting choked up right now. It's because I fucking love Michael Hauser.
Yeah.
The fact that we lost that man in the prime of his life. He was a really, really genuine person. And that came through in that moment. Him really showing his appreciation for our obsessiveness, for our appreciation of his art was really something. And I will always remember that, and I'll always take that with me.
I remember 2 times. So I met Gary Vereen one time. The Talking Heads had come to play the theater, and Brown Cat had a section roped off up top. And I happened to be bartending in the balcony that night, and he came over and we were talking, and we had a good laugh. He remembered me as the kid that my dad would bring to the parties, because I was a little too young to be left at home, but not too young to kind of be out and about. And we had a good laugh about. He was like, "Yeah, I remember you were the one that was always pumping the kegs." But I only got to see Hauser one time, and I was bartending downstairs, and he came in with Barbette and had a 6-pack of Budweiser and stuck it behind, handed it to Brian Crane, who was the other bartender standing next to me, and we put it in the ice for him. And I remember the way he was holding Barbette's hand as they walked off to go down front. I don't even remember what band was playing that night, but it was clearly a date night for them. And you could tell by the way that they were holding hands that they were in love. And, here they are, he's been on the road. He's finally home and, we're going out. And I feel you on that. He was a soft-spoken man, but sure did play the soundtrack to our lives. And I'm certain by the way that you were retelling that story that he meant as much to you as he did to me. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, I feel very, very lucky because I got to meet a lot of these folks and the people around them, at a time when that was still possible and they were still kind of figuring themselves out in a way. And I am so grateful for those experiences, and I'm really grateful for how welcoming they all really were. But in particular, Dave and JD and Michael, they were really very accessible to me, and I really appreciate it. I realize now just how unique an experience that all was. It's a good thing.
No doubt.
It's thinking back and like reminiscing on things can be a little weird because it's at this point those are the olden days in a way. But I like to see new music and I like to see new bands, and I try to remember. I had someone the other day tell me that MJ from 10th Mountain Division was like, "Oh, you lived in the best time. You had the best experiences. I mean, I really wish that I had experienced that."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no doubt. I mean, they were great experiences, but we create these experiences. We can create them now. Like there's nothing to say that the culture isn't here today for us to participate in a way that is just as meaningful and just as magical as those days that we were living before.
Did you post a video from that encore from J-Rad?
I did
recently.
Yeah,
man, that was killer. I wish I know why you only had a minute of video, but I've got to go see him. That sounded amazing.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. I have seen a bunch of J-Rad shows. I've been seeing them since they first started coming through Colorado. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge fan of that work. I really I don't really think of them as a Grateful Dead tribute band at all. They're actually reestablishing the Grateful Dead as a genre, mm-hmm. essentially. It's Grateful Dead music as genre. And that particular moment, they've played Morning Dew mm-hmm. at Red Rocks before, and they have definitely been able to have a reverent crowd. But to be able to pull it off again as the encore was really something. I was just kind of blown away by how they were able to bring the crowd to such a hush and such a reverent place.
I was going to
section that I posted.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the section that I posted on my Instagram feed is actually the second time through. Mm-hmm. They had already started the song and brought it way down.
Oh my God.
And it was really, really quiet. And then they brought it way up and it was raging. And then they brought it down again. And that's my clip, is the second time they brought it down.
Oh. That's
really difficult to do. And it's very difficult to do in a place like Red Rocks where you can sneeze and someone's going to hear it.
It was absolute. It seemed like it was absolute silence with, except a couple of people yelling. But I was like, wow, these people are really tied into this one.
Yeah, that's a magical feat.
Anybody else I'm always looking for new music. Anybody else you're listening to right now that you could turn me on to?
Well, dude, let me tell you, I am addicted to King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, these psychedelic magicians from Australia.
Okay.
I am a uber fan at this point. I'm going to end up going on tour to see them this fall with my brother and a good friend of mine, Pat. I'm going to see 3 shows here at Red Rocks in 2 days. They're playing 2 shows in 1 day at Red Rocks.
Wow.
They're a multi-genre band, most well known for their kind of heavy metal psychedelic sound, but they also do like funk and R&B and techno. They're starting some of their sets now with around a big techno table, and they do synth pop kind of stuff. I love them, and I love their
check
whole vibe. They're a band that allows for their fans to remix their albums and re-release them.
Wow.
They officially release multi-tracks that people can take and remix to do other things with. They have a very active fan base. There's multiple websites, multiple setlist websites at this point. There's a guy named Seamus Streamus on the KGLW Streams Facebook page that streams as many shows as he possibly can go to. He just did 16 shows in Europe, and every single show is being streamed with video. He has press credentials to get down to the pit.
Wow.
They're a lot of fun. I dig them a lot.
Okay.
Tomorrow night, I'm going to see a band called Wand. They're from the West Coast. And I'm pretty excited about that.
Wand is a magic wand?
WAND.
Okay.
I've been into, there's just a lot of stuff happening. It's so funny. I speak to people sometimes and they're like, yeah, music, they're just like, they don't think music's good right now, or I don't know what it is. People just seem disconnected from the culture. I can't tell you. I feel like this is one of the greatest times to be alive for music. There's just so much amazing stuff happening. Mm-hmm. There's the guys from Mapache, Mapache, California, like vibey, like you're on a beach with a campfire going. Their lead guy, Sam Belushi, just released a solo album that's got an amazing cover of God, what's the name of that song? Linger. You know, that Cranberry song, Linger. Fantastic album, really good album. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's a lot of local guys that I go see. The guys, Derek Dame Ole, he does a folk rock kind of solo acoustic thing. Highly recommended. He's a real deal. He writes some amazing songs.
Excellent.
There's a band that a friend of mine turned me on to the other day called the Groovy Nobody. Never even heard of them before until a few days ago, and I've fallen in love with their thing. If you like kind of straight ahead groovy, pop rock with some funk thrown into it, the Groovy Nobody, they seem like they have something I'll be listening to again.
I've written all these down, by the way, Ted.
Well, and I'll give you one last one. So the lead guy from Wand is this guy named Corey Hansen. And Corey Hansen released a solo album last year that is one of my favorites of the entire year. It's called Western Cum, C-U-M, kids, cover your ears. It's great. It's fantastic. It's really tuneful, but it's very tuneful, and you'll be like, oh, this is a catchy little pop tune, and then he'll suddenly just lay the heat on you, and it's just a huge guitar like onslaught, hitting you. So that's maybe one that I think you might enjoy.
I got it. Well, how can
wait, I have one more for you.
Please.
Okay, Alton. Have you ever heard of Alton Gun? Have you ever heard of Alton Gun before?
I don't think so.
Okay, it's ALTINGUN.
Okay.
2 words. Mm-hmm. They're a Danish-Turkish psychedelic band. And let me tell you, every time I put this on, like if I have people over and I put this on like at a party, every single time someone's like, man, who is this? Because they're just so funky and so much fun. They're contemporary. They just released an album at the end of last year. I think another one's coming out this year. Highly recommend these guys. They've got some stuff going on. So there you go. If you need more recommendations, call me up again. We can talk again. I've got a million.
Oh, definitely. You may cringe when I say this. I did get bitten by the goose bug. So we're gonna. I've seen them a couple times. We're gonna check them out when they come to Atlanta. I'm curious to see what's happening with them since they let their drummer go. They've got a new drummer, and that was kind of scandalous.
Yeah.
What's if people?
Yeah, Goose.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Goose has got it going on. I mean, they definitely came out of the pandemic just absolutely prepped and going.
They really embraced it.
Mm-hmm. And they've got Colorado roots. They kind of got their start, playing places in and around, but then, the Old Town Pub up in Steamboat, they'd come through and play every year. And, they've just really, people in Colorado are just absolutely nuts for Goose. I think they're playing Fiddler's Green, which is where Billy Strings just sold out. I don't even know what it was, 17,000 seats. And so they're really, they're bigger than everything right now.
I remember Bennett went to go see him, and he was like, "Yeah, is he using auto-tune?" I was like, "Okay, Bennett's not a fan," but no, it's okay.
Yeah,
to each his own, Well, if people want to find you on social media, how can they find you and follow you?
Well, I am on Instagram, Ted Rock, TEDROCK. That's primarily where most of my energy goes. I do have a Facebook profile, Ted Rockwell, but I don't use Facebook as much as I used to.
Yeah.
I write every so often and publish things on Medium. You can find me Medium. It's Ted Rockwell at Medium. But really, beyond that, just look for me and say hi. I'm very approachable, and I love talking to people. And I have a whole ethic of live music is one of these things that's an important part of our culture. And the culture's not going to be waiting for you later on to participate in it. You need to participate in it. The culture is because you're participating in it. It is your culture, by the way, and you should participate in it, whether it be like the guy, playing with an acoustic guitar at the coffee house down the street for 45 minutes, or Goose at, Fiddler's Green, a big event. These things are important. They're important for our health, they're important for our culture, and they're important for what it means to be human. So Get out there and go see some live music.
Well, Ted, I know I need to let you go. I want to be respectful of your time, but I wanted to tell you one more time how much I appreciated the work that you guys did, because at the time the internet was new. I was not traveling. I wasn't making much money, but I was loving the tapes that I was getting, and to have Everyday Companion as a means of keeping up with what was being played, even though I wasn't able to stream yet, things like that, it really filled a void and created a lot of conversation amongst me and my friends. So thank you for all the work that you put into that website and everything that you've done for the community. I hope that people will get to know you a little bit, and I just wanted to give you your flowers, because you played a very integral part in my widespread panic experience over the years. So thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. I mean, like I said, the project itself is meant for people like you and for people to connect with and do things with. I can't tell you the number of people who have come up to me and said, "Thank you for the website, because I started a band because I started learning widespread panic songs off of your website,"
Dude, I've been doing some volunteering at Nucci Space, and they've got, sorry, I'm rambling. They've got this program called Camp Amped, and it's going on this week and next week. And everybody had 5 minutes to get up on stage. This is the first day. They're rotating. And some kid got up there and did one-arm Steve, and I couldn't believe it. He couldn't have been older than 18. So you're absolutely right. It's the music lives on.
Yeah, for sure. I really thank you for inviting me to talk on your show here, and I hope everything is going well for people in Athens. I hope to get back there someday soon.
Thanks so much, Ted. Have a great evening.
You too. Take it easy.
finding